Good afternoon, everyone. I am not Councillor Ian Darcy, Chair of this committee. He is en route and will imminently be with us shortly. But as Vice Chair, I will step in and get this party started. Good afternoon and welcome to the National Infrastructure and Growth Scrutiny Panel. Before we start these proceedings, I'd like to bring your attention to some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the sign to the nearest fire exit and meet at the fire assembly point near Cafe Roma in our beautiful civic square. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when you are not using it and that your mobile devices are turned to silent. This meeting is being broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Waspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. I'm now going to ask Hannah. Hannah, do we have any submitted apologies for today?
We don't have any apologies, but as you've mentioned already, Councillor Darcy is on his way.
Thank you, Hannah, and for everything you do to help prepare for these meetings. Second on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members present have any declarations of interest in respect to items on today's agenda? Councillor Swaston.
Yeah, I have a declaration of interest in regards to the BSIP that's being brought up as Plymouth's bus champion.
Thank you. We'll make a note of that. So item 3 on the agenda is the scrutiny panel responsibilities.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry. That item shouldn't be on there. I do apologise.
Thank you. So moving to the correct next item, minutes, would be that we need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July. Do all people here agree that those are a correct and fair reflection of the last meeting? Wonderful. Now, number 5 is Chair's urgent business. I don't know if the Chair has any urgent business as he's not here, but as Vice Chair, I've been notified of no urgent business, so we will move on to the next item. So we'll move on to item 6, first substantial item on the agenda, which is on Plymouth's economic strategy and the delivery plans. I believe we're handing over to our dear leader, Councillor Tudor Evans, to introduce the report, and we're delighted to also have Amanda Razzi with us as well, who's Head of Economy, Enterprise and Employment. I understand you're providing an update on progress so far in developing Plymouth's economic strategies and presenting the proposed approach for developing the delivery plan. So I'll hand over to you both. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to start with a video. And it's not a video of me and Amanda attending the scrutiny meeting. good here, isn't it? I mean, you know, the thing is, it is good here, and one of the things that, you know, I spend a lot of time about is telling people exactly how good it is, because I think there are a lot of people that give their eye teeth to have what we've got here, and one of my great frustrations is not having enough support, for example, from local media for just what has been achieved in the city with, you know, what we've got. So we've got to make our own luck a lot of the time. So we're here today to talk about the next steps in the economic strategy, which is our next steps in making our own luck. But I thought it's worth, since we were last here talking about this, I think it's March.
Yeah.
March. So there's a few things have happened since we signed off the overarching document last time. We've had 2 elections. I don't know whether you remember that. A local one and a general one. We've had a change of government. And this economic strategy aligns with the 5 missions of the Labour government. Who'd have thought that, eh? So what I'm delighted to see is that we must be doing something right, because it's not just me going and talking about it. If you might have seen a few weeks ago the Good Growth for Cities report by the consultancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. They declared that Plymouth was the best place in the country to live and work for quality of life and for economic performance. Again, who would have thought it, eh? So that achievement places Plymouth, you know, not ahead of smaller competition, but the big people, the larger metropolitan areas like London, like Manchester, and Birmingham. The annual report assessed cities across 12 criteria, right, which included income, jobs, housing, health, skills, and work-life balance. And Plymouth's top ranking comes as a recognition of its dedication to creating an environment where economic growth goes hand in hand with balanced living. And again, that video that we just saw, I mean, our natural advantages, yes, but we've added a few unnatural advantages as well, including a full-size mammoth. I was showing some people about our full-size mammoth yesterday at a funeral. I never waste an opportunity to do that. The city's seen some marked improvements in areas such as job creation, income distribution, housing accessibility, all of which have contributed to our rise to the top of that PwC index. Now, Plymouth has long been described as a city of potential, a bit like Argyle, being a club of potential. But I have to say that it finally feels as if we're on the cusp of that potential being realised, you know. We'll ensure that the benefits of growth will be felt widely across all our communities. We'll raise living standards and improve the quality of life and health. We will work hard to ensure that those individuals and communities are helped to access new opportunities, that they have the help and support that they need and not going to be left behind or ignored. Now, you already know we've delivered a marine city deal. We've secured the Southwest only free port. We've created the UK's first national marine park and opened one of the UK's most important cultural attractions, the Box. We have retained one of the very best economic development teams in the country, of which we can rightly be proud, not just because other councils have been dispensing with their teams, we've kept ours, but ours are of premium quality. The job is far from done, and we've got even greater ambition for Plymouth and its citizens as we plan for the next 10 years of economic growth and prosperity. Now, we'll build on our strengths and our recent successes, focusing on those high-value sectors such as defence, marine and manufacturing, whilst supporting new and emerging sectors such as floating offshore wind, creative industries, and the development of our ports. And I'm going to talk about that in detail a little bit later on. Now, we'll make sure that our current and future workforce is equipped to benefit from the new higher paid jobs. And we'll develop our cultural offer and continue to improve Plymouth city centre and its waterfront. Now, the way forward is not without challenge. A tight labour market and growing demand for skilled workers, a city centre that needs reimagining, and of course, the climate emergency. Now, Plymouth is so fortunate to have such amazing businesses, world-class teaching and research institutions, and vast opportunities. We are the only place in the UK where the continuous at sea nuclear deterrent can be based, and that guarantees a 70-year pipeline of investment in our dockyard. Can you tell me of another city where there is currently a £4.4 billion worth of opportunity like there is in Devonport right now? This level of investment is like our Olympic bid, and we will grab the opportunity that it provides for good growth. The next stage in our economic strategy is to look at 3-year delivery plans. As I said, we must be doing something right. So we're going to finish off the projects we have started, if I can borrow the famous phrase. We are proposing to develop a delivery plan under 4 headings. Number 1, the heart of the city. Number 2, waterfront and maritime. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit. Defence and Devonport is number 3. And number 4, the north of the city. There is a lot to be proud of and a lot to do, but we should feel optimistic. This feels like a turning point for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies for my late arrival. Apologies to all members. I'm afraid traffic was against me. Amanda, did you want to add to that?
I've got a very, very short presentation, and I'm just going to skip over it. Yeah, we've already approved the economic strategy. We've gone out and we've sort of done a data capture of the existing projects that are out there. So this isn't a strategy just for the council. This is a city-wide strategy. So we've spoken to the university, we've spoken to the science park, we've spoken to the community development trust. So we've got a broad sort of cross-section. We've gone out and we've sort of gone fishing and captured everything into our nets. If you just move on to the next slide, please. Now, just to remind you a little bit about our original economic strategy, we had 4 pillars, and those 4 pillars are high-value jobs, sustainable growth, civic pride and regeneration, and inclusive growth. So as we've been looking at our sort of developing this next phase, we've been looking for projects like this slide shows as a Venn diagram where as many of the projects as possible meet all of that criteria. We're not looking for a project to put our emphasis on just one thing. We're looking for projects that help deliver multiple things to serve to work hardest for our communities. So can we just move on to the next slide? And just to remind you, this is what we agreed in terms of the economic strategy, the things that we will be looking for our economic strategy to deliver. Now, Tudor did mention a few things have happened since we wrote that. And I think we may have to turn the volume up on one of those, which is housing. Yeah. In this, we said, and we thought we were being ambitious back in March when we wrote down 5,000 new homes. I think we're going to have to turn the volume up on that. So as part of this sort of next, our sort of refresh and making sure we've got it right, that's something that we may come back to, and that will probably be picked up in some of which I'm sure we'll come back to at another time, around the number of homes that we need. And it's the number of homes that we need for the workforce that we need, because just sort of touching on some of the numbers that we've got up, we are in a really great place. We're really ambitious in terms of the number of new jobs we're creating and the number of jobs we have already created. So we just move on to the next slide. Tudor touched on this. This was talking about what's changed and the Olympic bid opportunity that maybe sits alongside on what we've got happening around the naval base. The numbers there and the growth that is there is something that we should be putting our arms around and making sure that it works for the city. And you'll see when I come to the 4 areas that we're looking at, that is something that is going to be driving our growth. And if we don't embrace it, we'll miss out on that opportunity. Babcock have said to us that they need 5,500 new jobs just to sustain the workforce that they've got in the next 10 years, and another 2,000 construction workers. That's 7,000 in total that we need for the city. That's a great opportunity, and that those are high value jobs. So if we can make sure that our local people can access those jobs, that is something that can, it can change, it can make sure that we deliver that table that I put earlier. You just slip on to the next slide, please. So in terms of how we were looking to develop it, skills is cross-cutting. Whenever we looked at it, whichever area we look at, everything needs a skilled workforce, and it's a driver for innovation. We need a skilled workforce to have sustainable development because we've got different types of skills. We need it for defence and the Devonport. We need it to be able to build new homes. And you need it for the north of the city around, and particularly around some of the healthcare and the healthcare provision. So skills we're proposing is cross-cutting. We're proposing that we have a focus on the heart of the city, and we've deliberately used the language of the heart of the city so that it extends beyond just the inner ring road of the city centre. We're looking at how that it expands outside and looks at going down towards Union Street and out towards Catwater. We're looking at the waterfront and maritime, and I know that your next agenda item is around the port strategy, but this is looking at opportunities around floating offshore wind. It's looking at opportunities around our port infrastructure. It's around looking at the smart sound and what that can offer in terms of our opportunities around autonomy. The north of the city, we're looking at how we reimagine the science park and the opportunities for building stronger relationships with the hospital and what that could look like, and what a science park for the next 50 years would look like. We're looking about some of the communities that are in the north of the city and making sure that opportunities are for them as well. So places like Whitley and the Four Greens Trust, they're built into that. And finally, sort of defence and Devonport. And at the moment, we're working very hard with both the MOD and Babcock at looking at how we can catalyse and make sure that that investment that's going into the naval base, that local people can benefit from it. It's an opportunity, a regional opportunity. This will extend for the whole city, but also into our travel to work area, and make sure that that opportunity benefits our local supply chain, it benefits the local people that live nearby, it benefits our research and innovation, and it acts as something that we can be proud of and will change the city, because that. So these are the 4 areas that we're looking at in terms of our structure for our delivery plans. Now, the thing that I just also want to sort of mention, we're asking you to look at this as an approach in terms of having these 4 delivery plans, and we're also asking for your sort of feedback around that we work on 3-year timeframes, because I'm not sure we can say categorically that we're going to know what this looks like in 10 years' time. We've got to finish, as Tudor said, we've got to finish off the projects that we've got. We need to bring new projects on board. So there are 2 things we're looking at: the existing projects we have to finish, new projects that we have to do, and then there are other projects that we need to bring forward so that in 3 years' time, that we have a pipeline. So we're thinking of this, I think probably a way of describing it is a bit like a hopper. As projects finish or things that we were doing drop out the bottom, we've got new things to come in on top. So we can continue to deliver this level of ambition. So I hope that gives you sort of a bit more sort of background in terms of what was included within the document. We've listed some examples of the types of projects that could fall into those 4 headings. But please don't view that as the final list or even the list, because it's actually the approach that we want to sort of check that we've got the right approach before we get into the finite detail of what the actual individual projects are. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much. Before I invite any questions from the committee, I note your remark about changing it or refreshing it every 3 years. So our recommendation before this committee is every 2 to 3 years. Are you proposing that we just say every 3 years? Is that the plan, or do you want it left 2 to 3 years?
3 years, it says 3 years in the document.
Oh, sorry, on
Okay,
mine
thank
it
you.
says
Yeah,
2
it's
to 3.
probably my language was a bit sloppy.
No, it's what's on my document. Thank you. It's my error. Thank you. Okay, members, over to you. Any questions? Thank you, Josh.
I remember to turn my microphone on this time. Thank you very much. That was really interesting to hear. I guess my particular interest is in the marine and sort of maritime ambition. And it's interesting to sort of hear about flow, cargo and things like that. But I guess, would you be able to speak to us on how this will impact, smaller SMEs, unskilled labour markets, those sorts of things, please?
So there's a couple of things on that, Josh. So we've got to make sure that our workforce or our residents can access the jobs that are going to be the jobs which are emerging, the jobs that are already there. So there's a piece of work that we need to look at, and maybe look at how our skills provision, and Tudor, please, works as a career progression, sort of an escalator. So it's not just, it's how you raise aspirations in primary schools, how you then make sure that people are doing the right GCSEs, that means that they can access the right jobs, where there is a career progression. So this is what we're really sort of talking about in terms of STEM, in terms of making sure that we've got enough people that are doing STEM, and then making sure that we've got an FE system which is fit for purpose, that can then progress into our university systems, and then how they can then move forward to access the job. So there's quite a big piece of work in terms of joining all this up, and that's about how we work in terms of the business ecosystem. Tudor, is something you want to add?
Well, we're anxious about developing the building next door with the college, a city college, to provide a blue-green skills hub to anticipate some of the stuff that's going to be coming forward. I mean, there's no doubt if we're going to raise wage levels, there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is to have insufficient numbers of skilled people so the wages rise up, but that's not the best way of doing it structurally. Actually, if you look at what we've got, there's a high number of people who've got no skills or very few advanced level skills. So, we got a job on there to try and make sure that we've got to transform that. And our skills strategy will tackle that head on. We've got to. We've got to find a way of getting more of our young people to stay here and to work here. And one of the ways we do that is by equipping them for work. And I'm giving them the relevant skills to take those jobs on. And the reason structurally why we can't do that is just, we need more, it needs a more concerted effort. So like on this thing, we've been talking about the Olympic bid, and I use those words because it's kind of trying to describe the vastness of the scale of the opportunity, really. So the Olympic Stadium's being built, right, in the dockyard. That's the £4.4 million investment.
Billion.
4.4
billion, yeah. Did I say a million?
Yeah.
Oh dear, that's not it. 4.4 billion. And of course, what you need then is you need people to, as well as to construct and build that, there's also a shockwave that could be felt in the local economy if we don't provide enough skilled people to go in there when that work is finished, when that construction work's finished, and while that construction work is going on. If you know, the parallel we've been looking at is Hinckley, for example, just up the road, just up the M5, where loads of people, skilled people, were sucked in there at the expense of firms from all over the southwest and South Wales. So we want to avoid that, and the way we avoid that is by planning for it not to happen. And you know, that's kind of part of our discussions with government right now, is to try and make sure that they understand that although we see this as a tremendous opportunity, if we don't get the planning right economically, it's a threat. So you know, that's where we're at the moment with that. But the other thing about flow as well is, again, you know, the idea, we're probably not going to be building those giant things, which are the size of the Eiffel Tower. We've got nowhere to put them down here. Somebody else will have to do that. But where we are probably in a really good place is in the support side of that industry, servicing and support. And again, making sure that the FE and the university, for that matter, are in a position to provide the opportunities for people to learn and therefore to participate in those industries when the time comes. So it's all about the preparation right now. It's all about the anticipation and trying to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity.
That's perfect, thank you. I guess it is reassuring to sort of hear that planning is a key factor. And also, you know, on the side of that you were picking up, you know, that need for housing, because, you know, recruiting all these, you know, skilled people and unskilled people, they're going to need to live somewhere.
Well, you know, you know, one of the reasons that we got to revise that 5,000 figure up is we're already succeeding in the sense that, you know, we've been working with Homes England. I think we've reported this publicly already, to develop, you know, 5,500 homes in the city centre area. And we think, you know, the potential for taking it a bit further out means that we can do even better than that. But there's opportunities throughout the city. I mean, you know, as you know, there are a number of sites being identified through the Emerging Plan for Homes 4. We've already got a huge number of areas with planning permission already for housing, which housing companies haven't yet, developers haven't built out yet. So the opportunity is here, the land is here. And you know, again, I think we're ahead of the game. I think the crucial thing is that we want to paint ourselves as a city that's up for growth. And if we're up for economic growth, we've got to be up for housing growth. And the government has announced an incredible target, 1.5 million, which is easy to say, but not very easy to do. But we're one of those areas that have made it plain to the government that we're up for growth. Homes England see us as a place for accelerated housing growth. That's the way they've described us. We're one of 20 cities in the country, places in the country that they've designated it as that. And we hope that funds will flow from that. And what also flows from that is the belief that we're serious about it. Make no mistake, the starting of the reconstruction of Armada Way has sent out an incredibly powerful signal to housing developers around the country that we're serious about reimagining the city centre. Not only are we really imagining it, we're actually doing it. You know, we've already got interest from a number of places, a number of organisations that are keen to help us with our ambition.
Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Good afternoon. And yeah, thank you for the video and the general presentation. There's some brilliant things happening in Plymouth. We're on the up. But there is, within certain high-profile projects, a disappointment with delivery, okay? And I don't want that to overshadow all the good work we're doing. So you talk about the heart of the city projects. I think they're some of those key projects that the public have lost confidence in because it's so, you can see it, it's so visible. So the train station development, Central Park, okay, the city centre, okay. How will this document, which is, it's got the words in it, how's that going to satisfy local people that these are going to happen in a timely manner?
Well, I can start with one or two of those. We've started work on a motorway. I don't know whether you missed that, but we started that about 3 weeks ago with the phase one at the top, which will see the rebuilding of the Phoenix Fountain, featuring a phoenix, which hasn't been there for quite some time. And when that project will be finished in the spring next year, we'll commence phase two. And then when that's finished, in about 26, we'll start phase three. So that's underway. The work is still going on in the Civic Centre next door. We're waiting on final confirmation from Homes England on some funding packages, but that's on the way. The railway station, well, I mean, we have secured, I think it's fair to say, a pretty impressive start to it, a £50 million investment by the University of Plymouth in the only building that Dr. Beecham opened, which was the Intercity House, which is now the home of their medical school. And we're waiting at the moment on conversations around the new accommodation for trained staff, which needs to happen. That will involve the dropping of the risk building and the creation of a new accommodation block on what is currently the short-term car park to the west of the railway station. What was the other one you said?
Central Park.
Central Park. Well, you know, we've had a few problems with Central Park, with the ponds and the weather. But I think the council put out a statement 2 weeks ago that work is, we're confident of that work being finished in the new year. You know, we've had a lot of rain lately, and that interrupted things. But and we had some problems with contractors as well. So I wouldn't take that as a sort of measure of our failure. If you look around the city, we've actually developed quite a lot of stuff in the meantime. So you know, I wouldn't want your pessimism to take hold, Steve. I think we've got a lot of success to celebrate, but I would say that the Central Park project will be completed sometime in the next year, and I look forward to you being along for our opening ceremony and casting a few pebbles in the ponds.
Thank you for that. I think it's just, there's no doubt about it that there's projects that are starting. Yeah, it's the finishing the job. Okay. Do we actually have official end dates for those three projects I mentioned? The train station, Central Park, and the city centre Armada Way scheme?
No, the train station is a work in progress. It was always a 10-year project. So we got into a bit of a doom loop around the ending of, if you remember, the government ended the franchising, and with that, the ability of the train company to invest. So we've been waiting on the old government to invest in projects, and of course they're no longer there now, so we're going to restart those conversations with the new government. We're going to be putting in a bid for the next funding period for the staff accommodation, but getting started on that will depend on a successful bid to government. In terms of the ponds, I think I said that we would be finishing that next spring or summer. I think we've already put that out in public. And the Armada Way project, we put out in our press release that we would be finishing the phase one in the spring, starting phase two in the spring, finishing phase two sometime in 25, and then an end to phase 3 by the end of 26. I believe that was our time period. I'll check that, and if somebody could let Steve know exactly what we said in that press release, but we've already publicly said what we plan to do about that. But in the meantime, we can send you a list of things that we have completed, if that were just for completeness.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions on the strategy aims and then a further one on the waterfront and maritime. I don't know how we're doing with time, so feel free to stop me. So my first one is on making the city more fun. Love that. Want more people to engage with sports, heritage and culture. It's the only one of the aims that isn't SMART. So I wonder if it's possible to add some statistic goals to that one.
I had a go at doing that, so how would you measure it? So we were looking at like the number of people that came to events. We looked at that. We've looked at the number of people who went to the box. We looked at the number of people that went to the Theatre Royal. It's actually quite. It's like what you put into that basin. But there is definitely something about how you make it more fun. Mm. If anyone's got an idea about how we measure it, I am open. Yeah, open to suggestions. But it's got to be something that is not so expensive to keep sort of track, that we end up just spending all our time measuring it rather than actually doing it. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions on that.
Did you say your second question relates to maritime? Is that for the next agenda item?
No, it's still on this one. So
okay,
my second question is still on the strategy aims, and it's on vacant buildings.
Yes.
Whether we have a separate strategy to that, what that strategy focuses on, and whether we can see that strategy if it does exist.
So that we did a piece of evidence base when we were doing this. We actually went out and counted the number of vacant buildings in the city centre, particularly linked to making sure that any investment, as a result of the investment, the vacant buildings were no longer vacant. And one of the things that we were looking at, as you can see in various documents, is about how you change the footfall and move Plymouth city centre from just being retail focused to a broader mix. So in the evidence when we went round, it was actually last winter, there were about 100 vacant buildings in the city centre. But some of those were temporary uses, some of them won't come in. And so our aim, as you see in there, is roughly to halve it. And you know, that's what we were looking to. I think we will smash that target. But you know, I was challenged in terms of making sure that it was deliverable, but I think we will absolutely smash that target.
Great, thank you. And then my third question, it's great to hear that Langage are looking to move to decarbonise, moving towards hydrogen power. Yeah. I would be keen to hear why that was an alternative fuel that was chosen, knowing that it can be quite carbon intensive to actually get hydrogen in the first place. So 10 kilograms of CO2 produced for 1 kilogram of hydrogen. Yeah.
So this isn't my area of expertise, so we might have to go back and check this, but I have been told, to be very clear, that there's a difference between green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, and this is the green hydrogen, and it's being delivered as part of a government investment linked to Colton Power. So I will take that and find out more information about it, but I can't answer that in the detail, but I do know that there's been some research that's gone into it.
That'd be great, thank you.
That's
I'll take away the homework to think about how to make more fun, more smart. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sproston.
Thank you. Yeah, great presentation. The words change and escalation for jobs was very welcoming to hear. My only kind of slight concern with this in some of the more deprived areas around the dockyard is sometimes having this vast change can be quite worrying for quite a few local residents. With that in mind, I was kind of asking, is there some consideration been put in place to kind of safeguard those already employment, and how we going to ensure that we're not going to create any job displacement?
So can you just expand a little bit more what you mean by job displacement, just so that I'm...
Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of big companies Sometimes when they get a large amount of recruiting, they can look to create more minimum paid wages to jobs. And the kind of progression through these jobs can slow when we have large amounts of additional people come into play. So I'm just asking, how's that being balanced out, essentially? For those that are already in work, is there going to be a certain percentage of those already in work that will go through a promotional targeted targeted promotional, I'm trying to think of the words now.
So what are you looking at how people who are already, let's say, employed by an employer and making sure that we don't end up with a situation where lots of new people come in and they displace existing people in the workforce?
Yeah, or slow the promotional aspects of these people that are already in place and work some years. I think. Yeah, essentially. I mean, you can sometimes oversaturate, and this can cause issues in certain workforces, especially on a minimum wage, or those trying to come out of it in a degree of levels. And for some of the more deprived areas which are located around the dockyard, I was just wondering how we're looking at ensuring that we're not going to create that flood of minimum wage jobs. I know we're looking at some of the more higher end, and we're talking about the educational aspects of these people, but not everyone will want to go down that educational route, and how we safeguard in that.
I'm actually fairly confident we're not going to end up in that situation. So if you look at the evidence base, pre-pandemic, we had about 300 unique vacancies that were advertised per month. We have had consistently for the last year over 3,000 unique vacancies that advertise per month, and Plymouth generated 7,000 new jobs in the last 2 years. So our economy, going back to what sort of Tudor was saying earlier about how PricewaterhouseCoopers have said, look what's happening down in Plymouth. Our economy has got to the position where there isn't a shortage of jobs. So our previous economic strategy was all about jobs. Our current economic strategy is making sure that it's opportunity for all, and that's because we haven't got a shortage of jobs. What we've actually got is, in many ways, a shortage of people to fill those jobs, and it's makes my job actually a real pleasure. I am genuinely really excited because I don't have the same job as maybe some of my peers would have in other parts of the country. So in this instance, I am very confident that that is not going to be the issue.
I'm grateful, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the aim to bring 50 vacant buildings back into use. Is there a plan for exactly how that's going to happen? So is it the hope that growth just means these buildings will come back into use through private businesses, or is there an aim for the council to actually bring those buildings back into use ourselves as well?
Sorry, sir.
So a couple of things, if you go back to the vision for the city centre, and I touched on it earlier, we have to reimagine our city centre. It was designed post-war, and it was designed very focused on retail. There's been a substantial shift to change to a mixed use within the city centre. So Tudor touched on about how we would look to build more homes in the city centre. That will create additional footfall. It will create people wanting to be in the city centre at night, creating a nighttime economy. We've got some very clear interventions which are looking to bring health uses into the city centre. Again, that creates footfall. It creates different people coming into the city centre. We've got work that is sort of happening around changing education and bringing education into the city centre. So Tudor again touched on it earlier with the blue-green skills coming into the civic centre. That combination of those multiple actions will change the type of people that are coming into the city centre, what the city centre is being used for, and the existing investments that we have already made around cultural uses, around the box, around the Theatre Royal, around bringing in hotels, we think will also change. You know, those bits of the ingredients of the cake are all actually then being baked. So yes, we may do some direct interventions, some temporary use, but the main intervention is around changing the ecosystem. And that is what we believe will change the number of vacant uses, because just focusing on retail will not work.
Thank you. Councillor Rainsford?
Thank you, Chair. I was pleased to hear the very, very positive message about Plymouth being a city of opportunity for young people. Clearly, we need to raise aspiration from primary school up. And we've got this huge pool of graduates, both from the FE colleges, but from all our universities. It's not clear, and it's not, this report probably isn't the right place for it in many ways, but it would be helpful to understand whether or not we have any data on the retention of graduates currently, and where do they actually go in the city? Do the graduates go into Babcock who've got an ageing demographic and are desperate for new blood, or do they drift off elsewhere? Thank you.
We were talking about this only last week.
Yeah.
You've got some numbers, haven't you?
I have got some numbers. Yes, we've been looking at this. So this is the interesting stat. So 6% nationally of graduates want to live and work in the southwest. However, at Plymouth University, 63% want to live and work. 63%. So if we're going to go fishing for talent and wanting to keep people, there's a very clear evidence base that that's where we need to go. And we've been talking to the university, and I think there's something around economic intelligence and insights around matching what businesses need and want and what the university can provide, and making sure that we can do some matchmaking between those two. So I think there's again reasons to be positive.
It's in everybody's interest to get that right, not least for the universities, of course, because universities get measured on their employability statistics. So if you're producing graduates for jobs that exist elsewhere, you're not going to rate as highly as you might if they can be literally next door in the city. So I think there's a win-win, mutually beneficial conversation that can go on here, actually.
Thank you for that. Those figures are astonishing in many ways. Could I therefore suggest page 18, which has worked with university partners to improve student experience and build civic engagement to increase student commitment across the city, is a bit dry. I'm not, you know, if you're going out to students in that sort of language, that's probably not going to work. I'm sure you have a whole range of thoughts about where we might go to keep these students, but I wouldn't use language like that, personally.
Thank you. Councillor Holloway?
Probably won't.
Oh, sorry, did you want to come back? I thought it was an observation.
Good advice.
No, we're agreeing with you. Yes.
Yeah, good observation. You'll review that. Thank you. Councillor Holloway?
Thank you, Chair. Great to hear the figures on, did you say 7,000 new jobs advertised since the pandemic, and I think...
No, those are the figures just from Babcock.
From Babcock.
Just from, so there are, there's 7,000 new jobs in the city in the last 2 years, and there's also 7,000 that are needed by Babcock. So I suddenly just realised that it's the same number, but it could be confusing in two different contexts.
Well, thankfully, my question relates to both 7,000. You know, great story. I mean, I think this is a great strategy, and I like the fact that we're doing this review every 2 to 3 years. Great news that we've got those increased jobs, particularly many of those being high-value jobs in the last few years. Great that we've got those ambitions going forward. can I ask what assessment you've made out of those created and those ones planned for the future are likely to go to women?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. A lot of those jobs in going forward, so if I talk about the Babcock jobs, they are very STEM orientated. So they are maybe not as diverse as you would aspire to be. And one of the things that we have got on the list that we've been looking at, because we've been looking at this, is, for example, access to childcare facilities that are close to or nearby the naval base. So we've been looking at that. It's an area for improvement because there are so many jobs and opportunities here that all employers are going to have to think differently about how they recruit. And that includes flexibility, it includes thinking about caring responsibilities, it includes having a broader definition maybe about maybe people who've got health issues as well. And this goes back to that conversation that we were having earlier, right at the very beginning. It's about good growth. It's maybe making sure that everybody can benefit from it. So whether or not that's because you've got barriers, maybe because you didn't have the opportunities at school, and maybe this is an opportunity you can go back and access those opportunities, or maybe you want to return to work and you need childcare provision. But that is an area about thinking about it differently, and employers are going to have to think differently in order to make sure that they can get the workforce that they need for the future.
Thank you. I'd really love to see, and I'm not making a recommendation, I'm doing a preamble before my question, I promise. I mean, I'd really love to see if we, if we can assess the likelihood. We know that some of our employees in the city have making really encouraging steps about how we get more women. I was talking to a member of my family recently who started one of those highly competitive apprenticeships at Babcock. There's women in his cohort, but the girls and women in his cohort, but there's not parity. We've gone so far, but there is further to go. And I'd love to see a greater focus on how we make those steps. Some of this is structural, but there are things that we can do. I mean, are there recommendations that you'd make to employers or things that you'd like to see employers doing to address this? And do you think we can track the numbers so we have a realistic picture rather than going it's a problem, but we know it's a problem?
We do track the numbers. There is some issues with some of the data, but we do track the numbers. There's actually ONS data, and if you want to, I'll meet you and take you through the numbers. I've got a very small dedicated team who look at inclusive growth, and this is something that we put a particular emphasis on. There's something called the Plymouth Charter, and we've got nearly 400 businesses which have signed that, and that is all about what good looks like in terms of being a good employer and sharing best practice. But there isn't enough childcare provision, and that's been documented. We've got to turn the volume up on that in order to meet to get the workforce that we need going forward. So, is it good now? There is room for improvement. There's got to be room for improvement because we're going to hold back the businesses if they don't. Do you want me to add to that, Jerry?
Well, again, if you think in the strategy there ought to be something that we state around that, then please feel free to recommend that. I mean, there are certain organisations we work with that are really quite working in the right direction in this. The Institute of Civil Engineers, for example, I think are exemplary. I mean, if you go to their London offices, most people you meet in there now are women, actually, and which is a measure of the fact that, from a long way back, they've been encouraging women into that career path, right? So that's what needs to happen. There needs to be more pictures of women in those jobs for girls in school to aspire to, right? You know, it's a long job, but we need to make sure that we are participating in that and encouraging that.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, final question on this matter, because we've got
Just
quite meaty things to get through.
very briefly, because I appreciate that. Surely there's also a place for looking at the equalities agenda and weaving this through that. Instead of the emphasis being on, you know, how do we get more childcare for women? How about, you know, childcare can be all parents' responsibility. It doesn't have to have that gender bias built in. Also, where it comes to being inclusive, I assume you'll be working with organisations like Access to Work to make work more accessible for everybody, for those with long-term health conditions and disabilities. Work with the unions. I hope they're going to be consulted along all of this, because I'm sure that the job opportunities are very much something that would be welcome. But on the whole, yeah, brilliant strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. May I just query one thing? Did you say when students were surveyed at the university, it was 63% indicated that they want to stay in the city? Sorry, in the southwest.
In the southwest.
From Plymouth University.
Yes.
Do we know the retention, the actual retention numbers? So that's an indication to remain in the southwest.
I have got it. I can't quote
Okay.
it off the top of my head, but I can find it for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tudor and Amanda, for very interesting presentations, some really good questions. Unenviable task. I love your analogy about the ecosystem and how we're all stakeholders in that, but not to the detriment of one particular industry or service provider. We talked about an element of displacement and how that could affect other businesses. So it's quite an ecosystem with very ambitious plans, notwithstanding the additional home building and Babcott's desires to grow. So an awful lot of work to be done, which we're very confident will be achieved. The plan is very much part of that. Members, we've been asked to make the recommendations set out in your pack, recommendations 1, 2 and 3. I don't think I need to read them, save for the amendment that it should be 3 years. Mine says 2 to 3 years. Are you content to agree with that recommendation? Anybody against that? Thank you very much. Tudor, I think you're staying for the next item, aren't you? Great, thank you. I'll allow the reshuffle and then we'll start again.
You've also got you've got Matt Ward, who's not on.
Very quick one, Chair, for the record. There was obviously conversation around Central Park and the ponds. I've looked at the website here and it states that it's subject to good weather, fair weather, and lack of rain. Works will be finished and the park will be restored to full access by summer 2025.
Thank you, that's great. Thank you. Members, we're now on to item number 6, Plymouth Port Strategy. Councillor Evans remains. And perhaps Matt and Ian, you'd like to introduce yourself before we hear from you both. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Matt Ward, I'm Head of Regeneration and Growth.
Hi, Ian Mackleworth. I'm Principal Surveyor in the Strategic Development Projects team, and I've been leading this piece of work. And we've also got Ben Mason.
I just spotted that, thank you. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself? Test for you now.
Ben Mason. Hello, if you can hear me, it's Ben Mason from Mott MacDonald.
Thank you very much. Tudor, are you introducing this?
Yes, please. I don't think I can remember a time when I was quite as excited as I am today to bring this report to scrutiny, Chair. This is the untold story of our incredible ports. The people of Plymouth will know a bit about our 4 ports: Capdown, Sutton Harbour, Mill Bay, and of course Devonport. But until now, the impact and potential of the ports has never been fully understood. So I'm going to give you a few facts to help you understand this. Plymouth employs more people in the maritime sector than any other local authority in the country, more than Barrow and Furness, and more than twice the number employed in Southampton. Yes, twice as many as in Southampton. Plymouth's marine and defence sector employs more than 20,000 people, which is 18% of the city's workforce. Devonport Dockyard, as we all know, is the largest naval base in Western Europe and is the largest land user in the city, covering 650 hectares with 14 dry docks, 25 tidal berths and 4 miles of docks. There are 16 leisure and boatyards around the Sound, including 1,400 gold anchor berths, which I'm sure you know, Chair, are the 5-star hotel of anchorages for boat owners. 12 cruise ships visit Plymouth every year. In fact, there's already 20 odd booked in for next year. It's fantastic. Plymouth ports are at the forefront of marine technology and innovation, including research organisations and companies at the cutting edge of work to develop autonomous vessels and support the move to floating offshore wind. Plymouth Sound's natural environment is really important. It is part of the National Marine Park and is home to over 1,000 species. Over 6,000 hectares are in an area of special scientific interest. Plymouth ports underpin the wider growth in the marine economy, which has the potential, we think, to create an additional 2,600 jobs in the economy by 2030. Now, I think it would be harm for anyone listening to that list not to be impressed by the scale and diversity of our port operations. And whilst the Council doesn't play a direct role in port operations, unlike other parts of the country, we have commissioned this study. And that's because we think that ports have an important role to play in supporting future development and growth in the city. And it'll be our role as an advocate, city leader, and by creating a supportive policy environment. That's where we come in, okay? And it's my very great pleasure for us to have instigated this work. And I'm delighted to give it my full support as the portfolio holder and leader of the council. I'm really looking forward to you hearing a bit more about this. So, who's going first?
Who do we hand over to, leader? Thank you, Ian, is it?
Yes. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, I'll do a brief overview and then hand over to Ben to take us through the detail. So the council secured shared prosperity funding to undertake this work. The main aims have been to understand the current economic contribution in detail of the ports to Plymouth, and also the potential of the ports to attract investment in future, particularly in green jobs and supporting the transition to net zero. So we've been working with Mott MacDonald, who are working elsewhere in the country on ports, so are really well placed to give us a good overview and insight into how Plymouth ports sit alongside other operations. Their work started in March, and we've been working away through the summer to get to this point. They've done a pretty extensive baseline review. They've engaged with port operators and a variety of stakeholders. And I think that the key findings from that, as I say, without going into the detail, which Ben will share, is that the ports are thriving. There's a really highly evolved ecosystem. Devonport gets a lot of the kind of recognition because of the scale of the operations there, and rightly so, but actually there is so much more going on. And I think really this is one of the main things that this study has allowed us to kind of bring to light, actually, is that diversity. So that baseline work has fed into a strategy which has identified 6 areas of opportunities that line very closely with the economic strategy that you've just had a presentation on as well. And this work will very much sit underneath that strategy. It provides a kind of another level of detail, really, to support the wider economic work. I think the other thing I just wanted to highlight is this is a really highly competitive area. Ports are global operations, and all ports have to invest just to stand still, really. Vessel sizes are changing. There's lots of innovation in the way that ships are fueled at sea, and whilst they're in ports, and as I say, investment will be required just to maintain that current position and competitive advantage. So I think the strategy represents a starting point, a really important recognition of the vital roles that the ports play in the economy and the life of the city. And really what it represents, I think, is a kind of call for kind of coordinated action going forward to ensure that the ports can continue to thrive and really deliver for the benefit of Plymouth and its population.
Matt, are we going to go to Ben for the show? Thank you. Ben, over to you.
Hello. I'm going to share some PowerPoint slides. Chair, could you let me know when you can see those?
Yeah, we got that. Thank you, Ben.
Super. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm Ben Mason from Mott MacDonald. I'm coming to you from Bristol this morning, which to you folks, I suppose, is the north. But that said, we do actually have a Plymouth office we opened this summer. We are committed to the southwest. I'm going to talk through the work we've done. A lot of this material is straight from the report, but it gives that full story, I suppose, from where we began and where we've ended up. As Tudor and Ian said, part of the purpose of this really was to understand the ports and the role they play today. That was a huge part of our study. Before then moving on into the sort of the case for intervention and some of those more strategic opportunities. So it is an economic piece of work. It's a strategic piece of work. But I do think it has a lot of really exciting good news stories within it, and a lot of nuance within it too. I begin with the outline. So the overall aim was to understand the ecosystem of the ports, to identify the opportunities to maximise their economic contribution to the city, support the transition to net zero and create green jobs. And within that, we had a few sort of more detailed objectives, a lot of it around understanding the ports, their strengths, their weaknesses, how they interact with each other. A big part of it was to help you and your officers, other members, to articulate that story and that contribution. And I hope that we've given you some material to help with that. We do develop a vision for the ports. We have a strategic vision statement. And then we move on to some opportunities and initiatives that can help in realising some of that strategic vision. You were talking just now about economic strategy. So these are the 4 pillars from the earlier economic strategy this year. This work, as Ian was saying, sort of fits underneath that and some of what Amanda was talking about earlier. Part of that overall economic system within Plymouth, and a key part of the story, particularly, I suppose, when we think about net zero, sustainable jobs in the region. Our process was fairly logical. We began with a lot of stakeholder engagement. So we talked to all the main harbour authorities, key businesses, other stakeholder groups, to really understand, their perspective on the ports, where their strengths are, where the challenges are. And that was a big part of our baseline report, which also brought in desk study research, analysis of economic data, to give that sort of comprehensive picture of the ports today. We analysed all of that into a sort of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats type matrix, which helped us to think about where the ports could be going in future and develop a vision for their evolution. And then lastly, we got to opportunities and mapping what those could be. I'll start with a bit about the ports themselves, because I think that this is a slightly nuanced picture in itself. So when we say Plymouth ports, we're actually talking about 4 different harbour authorities. You have the King's Harbour Master, who control the main waters, the big purple blob, and the Plymouth Sound. You also have Catwater in the yellow, Sutton Harbour in the pink, and Associated British Ports Mill Bay in the blue. So those represent the sort of the navigational waters, if you like. But it's not just about the water, it's also about the assets. So apologies, it's probably a little bit too small for you to see there, but there's a number of marinas, berths, quays, which represent different assets that comprise the port system. And going even further than that, we then looked at the actual businesses and employers in the area. So again, without going into too much of the detail here, you can see from some of these, there's a lot of different employers, different businesses in close proximity, which for the purpose of this study, we say comprise the sort of totality of Plymouth's ports. So there's the 4 harbour authorities, the assets, the businesses. These all build up that big picture of the ports today. And that picture emerges as one of real strength in diversity. This is exactly where Tudor began this, that Plymouth is, in my eyes, unique in the breadth of things it does. There are many ports around the country, around the world, which do 1 or 2 things well. Plymouth does lots of different things well. And so that diversity really shone through with everybody we spoke to. And when we were analysing, all the different parts that make up this ecosystem, it's a really exciting, genuinely diverse area of jobs and activities that go on there. This is complemented by the heritage, the landscape and environmental assets and benefits of being in the Plymouth area. And again, most of the stakeholders we talk to are really supportive of Plymouth's environment, its heritage, and this all adds to that picture of the ports today. There's plenty of economic analysis in the reports. I'm not going to go into too much of it now, other than to say that the contribution is really significant. This is where Tudor started earlier, that around 18% of Plymouth jobs are in this port sector. And when you total all those up, Plymouth is the number 1 among other local authorities in the country. A lot of that is driven by Devonport, but it's not all Devonport. There's the innovation, the engineering, technology, research, traditional port operations. All of these add up to that combined picture. Really, really substantial employer in the southwest and in the country. So what I've tried to do is just summarise the sort of case for intervention. And this is, what we've learned from the baseline. We know that the ports are really significant. We know they have huge economic value. And there are core skills that Plymouth is known for. So vessel engineering, manufacturing, freight, technology, particularly links with the university and a lot of their innovation. Training is another big part of Plymouth's skill base. This is what makes Plymouth and their ports strong today. But there are some challenges. A lot of the stakeholders we talk to, and from our analysis, we understand that the ports are nearing capacity in different ways. Some of it is the actual marine infrastructure. Others is things like laydown areas. There are different parts of the system that are reaching capacity. And also there's a changing nature of ports. Part of the story at the moment in the sort of energy transition of this country is that the ports are coming back into focus as an area of opportunity for things like floating offshore wind, hydrogen power, short sea shipping. The role of ports is evolving, and that creates challenges but also opportunities. So those marine growth areas on the right-hand side, things like autonomy, alternative fuels, conservation, robotics, all of these Plymouth is really well placed to contribute to. And there's broad support from stakeholders in that. So the key message, I suppose, is that with this strength to build on, there should be some strategic and coordinated action to maintain their vibrancy and diversity. We're not starting from scratch. This is a story of evolution, not revolution. But there are changes happening in ports, and it is a competitive environment. We have a vision statement, which I encourage you to commit to memory, which I hope gives a flavour of some of those strengths in Plymouth, but also points towards the future. So, this sort of sustainability and inclusivity is really central to this, is embedded in many of the different businesses and employers, and presents a lot of opportunities. Similarly, we've recognised Devonport in here, we've recognised the natural and historic environment. Unfortunately, we don't have a one-line vision statement because it's not a one-line port environment. What we've tried to do is to bring together and summarise all those key elements into a place that feels like a coherent narrative, and a really exciting one at that. We identified 6 opportunities to support thriving ports, and what these represent, I suppose, is a combination of things that are already underway. There's an enormous amount of activity and initiatives that are happening today, and we wanted to recognise that, but also point towards those areas for the future where further investment, further activity could bring benefits. So these represent, to some degree, overlapping, but hopefully distinct enough, 6 ways in which you could support the ports. What we've tried to do in our report is give some ideas of how the council can help facilitate and champion the role of the ports, given your role in the city. So those are kind of 6 broad categories that we think offer a lot of scope for Plymouth as we look to the future. And finally, what we've done with those categories is we've tried to map some of the activities and initiatives that are underway. So some of these you'll be familiar with, things like the Catwater Master Plan, things that have been happening around the fish market, all the investment and new jobs and skills initiatives in Devonport. We thought it would be helpful to bring some of these together to show the amount of activity that is already underway, and that sort of combined picture for the ports today, and point towards the future with the opportunities and the strengths that Plymouth has to offer. That's all I have for my presentation. I think I'll hand back for questions.
Thank you very much, Ben. Matt, did you wish to add anything before we open it up? I'm grateful. Members are keen to get on with the quiz, to the mission statement. Can anyone remember it? Yeah? Councillor McClay, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. There's a bit of a cross-cutting issue across all of today's agenda items, which is the transformation of our energy mix as we prepare for net zero. We've spoken about flowing offshore wind, hydrogen, district heating. It's mentioned in the pack that the national grid is a real limiting factor here. I just want to understand to what extent is the national grid going to pose a threat to our net zero ambitions? Because we are rightly very ambitious, given the scale of the threat, but also the opportunity that it would give for economic growth, ports in particular. Can anyone speak to the scale of the threat and how much that issue might hold us back?
I can a little, and Ian, you might want to contribute to this. So it is a constraint, and it is a well understood constraint. There are one of the aspects of it is what's called shore power, which provides power to vessels when they're in dock, and that provides that reduces the carbon intensity of those shipping operations themselves. There are initiatives underway for shore power for example, at Mill Bay at the moment, and there's a large investment into that. But there are other areas, particularly I think as you head further east along that coastline, where it is more constrained, and more dialogue with National Grid about that power supply in future would benefit the ports.
Did have a conversation with the grid, over Mill Bay. They gave us some bizarre timetable that they were going to do it in 8 years, and we said, you know, we must have misheard you, you know, and now they're not going to take 8 years. But you're absolutely right. There's an issue in the southwest, and that's an issue about transmission. It's an issue about community energy capacity and the ability to plug in. Happily for us, in the Labour Party manifesto, that I was able to influence the particular issue around the national grid. That is part of the Great British Energy conversation. So certainly the new government is aware of the constraints. Obviously, coastal areas of the country suffer most because it's, with apart from a few exceptions around nuclear, it's far away. It's far away from generation. So it is a problem. But Great British Energy are on it, but it's a long journey. In terms of shore power at Mill Bay, we're confident that that project will go ahead in a timely manner. It's got to, because the French government insists that their vessels that go to France, have got to be able to have clean power when they tie up alongside. So that means for us, their ferries will be converted and they will rely on shore power when they come into Plymouth. So that's part of the conversation. It's been driven by the needs of Brittany Ferries in particular. But what we've got there is a significant investment from ABP, who are going to, not only are they going to decarbonise the ferry bit, but actually their vehicles and support services around the port will also be like that. We've had conversations in detail as well with Catwater Harbour Commissioners are very keen to have shore power as well, and they've already invested in some electrification of their operations at Victoria Wharf. So we know it's happening. They're quite close though to a major arterial branch of power, which they may be able to utilise. Who knows? We don't know yet, but that's a possibility, which might help them with that wider decarbonisation ambition that they've got. As for the dockyard, we still need some of the nuclear submarines plugged into the mains. So, you know, their energy requirements will be considerable for some time to come. But we hope to have them in our circle of trust in due course.
I'm grateful, thank you. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you. In the report, the Mott MacDonald report, you're talking about ensuring wharves and berths are of sufficient quality and support multi-purpose uses. You want to identify and preserve sufficient hinterland space. And then you go on to say the next stage of growth would require a larger intervention due to a series of spatial constraints within the port areas. Elsewhere in the report, you talk about larger vessels coming along on stream and needing space. Are we talking about overall the requirement for more space? I'm not sure where that comes from. Or are we reconfiguring the wharves and berths and spaces we have to meet future requirements? And how does that all work when you've got pressure for housing and those waterside sites will be in demand unless they're specified in the local plan that they're retained for wharf purposes? I'd welcome your thoughts on how we manage the growth that you talk about in the report.
I mean, certainly I want to come in on that because, you know, we lost too much waterfront property of waterfront land to housing over the last 3 decades. I mean, if the DOI could have its time again, I'm sure that they wouldn't want to be flogging off bits of Turnchapel for housing, for example, but they did. I mean, there's a threat always to the port. We know that there's a speculator in Plymouth at the moment that wants to privatise, you know, the whole of ABP's land and put houses on it, and that would be a disaster. So I think one of the things we'll be looking forward when we next refresh our plan is to strengthen our protections as best we can over that precious waterfront industrial land. It's vital. I mean, clearly we can't create port space out of thin air. I mean, if we were looking at, for example, the floating offshore wind stuff, their land requirements are far bigger than anything we could possibly achieve. So we wouldn't be going down that road for that reason. But there are still other requirements for support services that would require. Is certainly to protect land that we already hold. In the case of dock space, for example, Catwater Harbour Commissioners are looking at a possibility of expanding their facilities there. There's ways in which that could be done. There's dredging going on at the moment in terms of potential dredging to get larger vessels into the port, but also the creation of larger dock space to enable them to have more stuff on, more vessels in at a time is something that they're actively considering. So there's lots to do, but that protection, the dock side, that's our job as a planning authority, and we must make sure that we do it. Stop the predators.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick comment to say that I think for me, this is one of the key reasons why we've been so keen to produce the strategy, because it provides us with the evidence base to make those decisions. And without the benefit of having the strategy, we would be, as you say, under a lot of pressure to designate land for housing, which we know is important. But if we didn't have the strategy, we wouldn't be able to demonstrate the reasons why we need to balance that with the requirements for the ports.
Councillor Sproston.
Thank you. As someone who's spent 20 years in Devonport Dockyard, I understand the monstrous scale of which these works are talking. I know how big a project this really is. With that said, I just wanted to query something about the support and understanding for the SMEs. Because on page 62, in the bottom left, it talks about ocean futures, and it mentions about SMEs. It says the organisation aims to bring together public and private partners, drawing on an ecosystem of SMEs and micros alongside assets from across the Southwest, and then goes on to list various companies. Some of these companies aren't what I would refer to as SMEs. The bottom one, I think it's pronounced Thales or Thales. It's the French company who does the sonar, if that's correct. I wouldn't exactly call that an SME, but so I just wanted to kind of query when we talk about working with SMEs. Are we talking about working with independent SMEs, or are we talking about kind of subcontracted through these various bigger businesses? Because I have a slight concern about monopolization when it comes to some of these big businesses, and we could create a kind of sometimes working with exclusively the larger businesses can have economic dangers in the future when it comes to competition and pricing. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about the work involved with SMEs, if that's okay.
Who would like to take that? Thanks, Ian.
So yeah, I think the strategy, it's a strategy, obviously, just to say that it's a framework for action. And I think there's a couple of areas, a couple of themes where that would fit. I think it's around the expertise and innovation theme, and also around the fostering communication and collaboration. Actually, there's a lot of really good work that already goes on around developing thematic partnerships that deal with particular issues, whether that be around some of the environmental issues or the kind of visitor economy issues and things like that, where different port operators, different harbour authorities work together with the council to really kind of explore these issues in more detail and find solutions. So I think one of the things that Mark McDonald identified is that is the importance of that work and to do more of it. And I certainly think that there could be some scope for understanding how we engage some of the smaller companies in the supply chain in this work going forward, to make sure that we are not missing out on those sectors, as you say. And we're not focusing too much on the very large companies that operate in Plymouth and provide, fantastic career pathways and things like that. And, it's really important. That's such an asset to have. But as you say, not at the expense of some of those smaller companies. So I think there's certainly some work to do there. And particularly where those companies are working in that innovation space. And very often it's that combination of the large companies and the small companies working together that really delivers in that space, because it's the larger companies that have the expertise and the resources, etc., and provide the demand that the SMEs can feed in with their very specialist knowledge. So I think it's a really important point, and something which I think the strategy acknowledges.
Are you content with that?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Bannerman.
Thank you, Chair. With several parts of the ports having bathing areas, do we feel that there would be any further impact on the water quality, or what can we do to support the water quality? Bringing back into the last agenda item about making Plymouth fun. We love Plymouth Sound. People love swimming in it. How can we make it a better Plymouth Sound for individuals?
We can start off remembering, though, that in that big blob of purple that was on Ben's original slide, the National Marine Park's kind of quite a big part of that. So, in that big purple blob, there's those marine protected areas, which provide a vital haven for a lot of the marine life that are there. And of course, it doesn't preclude the discussions we'll be having with government about their role in getting South West Water to clean up their act, and also that the participation we have in TechF, for example, about the quality of the water that comes out of the water table and the water system into Plymouth Sound. The runoff from farming and all of those other things that contribute to the mess. So bathing water quality remains a high priority. It's part of our USP that in Plymouth that we have nuclear submarines, paddle boarders, the occasional dolphin, and wild swimmers. And if we're going to maintain that mix of uses, we need to make sure that water operates for everybody, and that we minimise the impact and the adverse impact that some activities have on the quality of that water.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation of the report. This may have been partially covered off through previous questions, but really, delighted to see the focus on flow as a potential, floating offshore wind as a potential avenue to do more in the future. I wondered, we're getting kind of growing reputation for this across the kind of Great Southwest, lots of pockets of innovation, interesting things happening on not too far from Plymouth's doorstep. And I wondered how many kind of conversations are going on, sort of how we can have a sort of sub-regional identity, thinking about our supply chains, thinking about Plymouth's strengths in manufacturing to join up more about, outside the city's walls, as it were, for thinking about our kind of regional reputation as a player on the international stage in this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the first point I'll probably say is that we do recognise that Plymouth is part of a much wider regional picture. So just to give you one example, that would be the work that we're doing with the Crown Estate, for example, at the moment. So the Crown Estate are responsible for leasing the seabeds where the floating offshore wind will be built in the Celtic Sea, and they are having conversations with ourselves and other port operators in the southwest to understand how the region as a whole can support that floating offshore wind activity. So as Tudor mentioned, we can't provide the large laydown space that other sites could for the manufacture of the turbines, but we've certainly got the expertise here in things like marine autonomy to provide maintenance and servicing. Those operational opportunities certainly exist for us in Plymouth. So yeah, that's I think the way that we would approach it, to make sure that what we are offering is complementary to others in different parts of the region.
And how do we sort of coordinate some of those discussions? What are the kind of forums, and how do we make sure that Plymouth's manufacturers who may be able to do part of a bit in the supply chain, how present are we? Are we confident we're doing everything we can to see opportunities for Plymouth in those wider region-wide opportunities as well and flow?
Yeah, so with the example of floating offshore wind, we recently held a conference here in Plymouth to bring all of those different players together to make sure they're aware of the opportunities, again, not just that exist not just in Plymouth, but in the wider region. We've got a number of other existing stakeholder groups that we use to liaise with local manufacturers. For example, we have the Plymouth Manufacturers Group, we've got the Plymouth Growth Board. So we're always pushing out these messages, and we have regular conversations with colleagues in MHCLG, for example, again to make sure that message is coordinated, and through the work that Tudor and others do with regular liaison with other local authorities, we're making sure that we are pushing out a message there that is complementary to what others are doing.
At the don't forget the growth board. I mean, we give a regular update, the growth board, and everything we're doing, and that, as well as having all principal stakeholders from Plymouth, does have the Devon Chamber of Commerce there, and both the chief executive and the chair sit on the board. For the chair is the chair of the growth board as well, and we work through that. I also give an update every 2 months to the Devon and Cornwall Business Council, and then we do collaborate across the south coast on the cluster. We have marketed together on the opportunities across the south coast of England in international environments as well. So we're always looking at ways in which we can kind of work together to give us more bang for the buck, really, because Plymouth on its own is very big and very clever, but it needs to be seen. So you're quite right, collaboration on a wider footprint is much more beneficial, and it will be more important in the future.
I'm very grateful, and it occurs to me, particularly after Councillor Bannerman's point about bathing waters, and this transcends everything that we do in this committee, and certainly the previous item, is just, it occurs to me at least, there needs to be further consideration about infrastructure, and South West Water are fundamental to all of the issues we've discussed today, but equally we know what's in the pipeline, and I do wonder, I'm not making a recommendation at this stage, but I do wonder if there's scope that we invite them to our agenda, and we have a discussion, perhaps with Cream and others, as to how beneficial that would be. They are a major stakeholder. We've got a lot of infrastructure planned, and it would be useful, I think, to hear what South West Water have got planned, because we need them to be almost one step ahead of us. So I think, Tudor, we might just have a discussion about that afterwards.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, knowing what's in South West Water's pipelines is very, very important, because there's a lot of stuff in that pipeline that we don't, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I'll just plant that seed and we'll have a conversation later. Matt, Tudor, Ian, thank you very much. And Ben, of course, thank you for taking us through that. Committee members, we've been asked to recommend, or rather the recommendation before you is to support the Plymouth Port strategy. Are we all in favour of that? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. We'll allow just a minute for a quick reshuffle. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you.
Members, thank you. We're now on to agenda item 7, bus service improvements plan number 3. We have Councillor Coker, Paul Barnard, and Philip Hastine. It's good to see you at the committee. We haven't seen you for a while. And who's going to lead on this? Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to start, Chair, and we've got Rosie Starr, who unfortunately was not feeling great today, who was actually going to lead the presentation, but Rosie will be able to do that from home. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and talk about Plymouth Bus Service Improvement Plan. This update follows the publication of the Council's third BSIP this summer and precedes the updates of the associated Enhanced Partnership Plan. Our BSIP vision is outlined. I'm not going to go through because we're running a bit late. Our BSIP vision is outlined in your paperwork. This plan is underpinned by 9 passenger priorities identified through through engagement with current lapsed and non-bus users and ranked in order of priority from the results of the 2023 Passenger Priority Survey, which was completed by more than 1,800 people. Our third BSIP, as per the previous 2 plans, is aligned with the ambitions of the National Bus Strategy to boost bus patronage and raise bus as a more used share mode of travel, with the BSIP setting out what the Plymouth Enhanced Bus Partnership will deliver to make buses easier and more convenient to use. However, crucially, responding to the new DfT guidelines issued in January this year, rather than being a bidding document for funds, BSIP 3 must be a delivery plan. Now, listed in your pack are the 9 key areas that were agreed with our users that we're working to improve. I think it's worth giving you just some very few stats that is showing the work is starting to have an impact in the city. Passenger satisfaction with bus journey times is up 7% compared to this time last year, and now running at 70%, which is a really good figure for satisfaction from our customers. Bus mileage operated is up. The punctuality of buses is improved, and customer satisfaction has also improved. Trends are encouraging, with over 14.5 million journeys being used in Plymouth. Some areas of our bus service has resumed back at pre-COVID levels. There are certain areas that are still struggling, and that's basically around concessionary travel. That has not returned to pre-COVID levels. I think also at the moment there is some uncertainty about what's happening over the next few months. We had an announcement yesterday of the £3 bus cap. I welcome that because the last government said that it would stop at the end of December 2024, the £2 fare. So I think we've now got consistency for the next 12 months, which will help the industry to settle down. Plymouth is doing, compared to our competitors of the same size, is doing a good job in protecting the networks that we have. With the use of the BSIP funding, I think it's fair to say we've used that to help enhance some routes in the city, introduced a new route or a collaboration of a new route, and are partially funding some less commercial routes to ensure that they're continuing to move forward. I think it's worth saying that with BSIP, year one, and for those of you that were around with me when it was scrutinised, we got zero money from government because we weren't seen as being bold and imaginative and having a plan to deliver. But for the last 2 years, we've managed to have £1.6 million to help our bus industry. And I think what's been the key to that is that we've fostered a very good relationship with the Department for Transport's bus team, who we hosted 2 years ago. We hosted this year as well. And actually our bus service improvement plan is now going to be used, and Rosie will go into more detail, is going to be used by the Department for Transport as a national exemplar for other authorities to use. There is still a lot. I'm not sat here saying we've come to the end of the journey, if you excuse the pun. There is a lot more that we need to do on public transport. But the last 12 months have proved that by working together with various stakeholders, members of the public and government, has actually made a difference to Plymouth's bus network. And I'm really proud of that. I've got a lot more, but I'm going to let Rosie come in now, Chair, just to do a few things.
Rosie, hi, welcome. Apologies, I overlooked you in the welcomes. What a lovely house you've got. I believe you're dialing in from your home. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, my apologies to everyone in the room that I'm not with you this afternoon, as I had hoped. As Councillor Coker said, I'm afraid I've been unwell over the weekend, so I'm still in my quarantine period and absolutely don't want to give anybody in the room what I have at the minute. So, Hannah, thank you for the first slide. If we could move on to the second slide, please. Thank you. So, building on Councillor Coker's opening statement, the need for a bus service improvement plan and a formal partnership to deliver it is driven by the 2021 National Bus Strategy. So in Plymouth, our bus service improvement plan is driven by the Plymouth Enhanced Bus Partnership, which came into being in the 1st of April 2023. Our plan covers all of Plymouth and it spans the period through to 2034 deliberately to align with the Plymouth plan, and that's because the bus service improvement plan is a delivery plan of the Plymouth plan. So through supporting the development of a comprehensive bus network in the manner that Councillor Coker has described, our BSIP delivers the strategy set out within the plan, and specifically policies HEA 6, so delivering a safe, accessible, sustainable and health-enabling transport system, and GROW 4, so using transport investment to drive growth and commitment to facilitate the use of sustainable transport modes. Next slide, please, Hannah. Thank you. As Councillor Coker intimated, we produced our third bus service improvement plan in the summer. That was in response to revised guidance issued by the Department for Transport in January this year. Crucially, as Councillor Coker said, there was a change in emphasis between this BSIP and previous plans, in that it's no longer a bidding document, but instead is a delivery plan. What the Department for Transport set out was that they wanted the emphasis to make clearly set out in our plan what's been delivered or completed by the end of 23-24, what was programmed for delivery this financial year within the known funding envelopes, the 1.6 million on our part, and the ambitions and priorities for future delivery in 2025 and beyond, so for us up to 2034. The BSIP 3 follows the prescribed structure set out by the Department for Transport, so we have followed the structure advised by guidance. Thank you, Hannah. So in the last 12 months, we have been able to deliver measures against all 9 of the passenger priorities, and those are summarised on the slide in front of you. And as Councillor Coker said, we've been able to do that through a new style of working. So it's close collaboration between the council, bus partners and specialists as required through the delivery of scheme delivery groups. They are specific task and finish groups who are designed to drive forward specific measures within the plan. We have 3 in place at the moment. So one looking at the bus passenger charter and bus user group, a second looking at passenger information and publicity, and the third looking at zero emission buses. And these the former 2, which the DfT have asked to be brought to the November National Bus Forum for sharing of best practice. So that's our work with bus passengers to understand their needs and passenger information and publicity. And we really welcome the opportunity to share that at the National Forum. Thank you, Hannah. So just what we wanted to finally end on is just summarising the engagement to date and planned going forwards for the Bus Service Improvement Plan, because our plan is based on feedback from lapsed, current and non-bus users and key stakeholders. And we want to stay in touch with passenger needs to make sure that our plan is delivering the best for the people of Plymouth. So in the pale blue are all the measures that we currently deliver in terms of passenger engagement. So we have chatter bus events. That's where you'll see vehicles parked up with buses and members of the team available to talk to people one-to-one. We have the Enhanced Partnership Forum, which I'm pleased to say is now a year old and is in a growing forum of stakeholders interested in public transport. We have the Passenger Priority Survey, which is what led to the 9 priorities set out within your packs. We have our Bus Champion, that's Councillor Sproston, who heralds and champions all things bus. We have our Bus User Panel, with a group of 21 volunteers who come together to share their experience of public transport and help us guide our work going forwards. We also listen to all complaints and compliments coming in, both to ourselves and to our bus operators. And we have the National Highways and Transportation Survey to keep a pulse check on terms of what we're delivering so far for the people of Plymouth. And what we're proposing to introduce as well is an annual engagement survey with ward members to understand the priorities and needs of each ward, so we can use that to inform future BSIPs and also share it with bus operators to inform network plans where possible. So that is a very brief whistle-stop tour of BSIP. I hopefully help set the scene for this afternoon's discussions. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, Rosie. Anything further, Paul or Phil? No. Great. Members, over to you for questions. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about priority number 4 is to do with sort of new and extended routes. And just wanted to ask a question about bus service to the crematorium, which I know has come up quite a lot recently. Obviously, I appreciate we've said that bus operators aren't interested in running a service at the moment, but we've said that we're going to look into it and assess whether there's demand for it. So just wondering how we're going to assess that demand and sort of looking forward to those priorities from 2025 onwards, whether or not there's any scope for something in the future there.
Thank you. I don't want to make this long-winded answer, but I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. I don't want to open all old wounds, but when the crematorium was granted planning permission and the agreement that was put in place, there was no identified need for a bus service. We've looked at the past, Councillor Smith, on there was a bus service between Plymstock and Plympton in the past, which wasn't sustainable according to the operators. We have also looked, and we are working with Saltram about the developments that they're doing to their entranceway and getting more people into that. The team and I are constantly looking at ways in which the bus service that you talk about could be integrated into the current system. That is work that is going on. I am awaiting eagerly the response from the tomorrow, the announcement that we'll get tomorrow. It is being put into our work list on our future developments, and it is something that I'm very keen to try and deliver, but I can't deliver it out of thin air. So it is on our priority, and we're turning all the stones to try and find a solution.
Councillor McLeay.
Thank you, Chair. There is a really great deal that's encouraging within this report, and I just want to thank all the officers and everyone involved in putting it together. It's a lengthy and meaty bit of work, but I really enjoyed reading it. I'm anxious, given the news that was announced yesterday about the £2 fare cap, which is our most popular fare, increasing to £3, that we'll slide backwards on some of the progress that we've made. Only 44% think our fares are currently offering value for money, and I really appreciate this news was announced yesterday. You're trying to wrap your head around what it means, but could you give us a little bit of an update on what impact you think that might have on our BSIP going forward?
Right, that's a very good question, because what I will say to the government is thank you for announcing that the day before we have a bus scrutiny, which kind of, you're quite right, Councillor McLeay, we haven't got our heads around it yet. What we did know is that unless the government did something, the £2 fare cap would have finished on the 31st of December, which would have had even worse consequences to what you're saying. So I'm glad that something is in place. I think there will be more detail coming out over the next few days, you know, because again, only today, over £1 billion to boost bus services across the country. So I think what we need to do as both the Scrutiny Committee, councillors, and through our BSIP and our enhanced partnership is that actually monitor what's happening out there. We don't, you know, I've not had chance to even talk to operators since last night, because I want to find out, we're talking about a £3 cap fare. What I want to understand is what are the implications that the bus companies are going to put on return tickets, and that kind of thing. Also, a lot of people who use public transport, like me, buy monthly, yearly, or weekly tickets. What are the reaction? What's going to happen to them? And I think having this partnership board that Councillor Sproston, who's left the room, you didn't need to, who manages and deals with that. We've got a mechanism now to actually have an understanding of what's happening from, I was going to say the horse's mouth, but I don't mean that detrimental to anyone, but it gives us something that we've never had before. We've actually got that information coming. So I'm sorry I can't be more detailed on that, but it was only less than 24 hours ago.
Yeah, I appreciate the timing. It must have been like pulling your hair out last night thinking about it. On the piece about engagement and hearing straight from the horse's mouth, I guess, there's that mention of ward member engagement. Do you have timelines for what that process is going to look like?
This was something that both the bus champion, myself, and officers were very keen. We've done a lot of work, and actually in our conversations with the DFT bus team, they were really impressed with what we were doing. And then I suddenly had a conversation with a councillor about what engagement they had. And to be honest, I'm sure you've all read cover to cover this huge report. But what I was kind of concerned about is that actually you have another way of talking to residents that we don't have. So we sat down and Rosie and I suggested that we needed to develop that. We are intending to have that start from next year, as we're in November in a couple of weeks. And I'm sure people won't want to be engaging over Christmas. But it's really important that we do that, and we do it every year. So we are going to be finalising how we do that, because there are different ways, as you appreciate, of doing councillor engagement. You know, we did drop-in session with National Highways a couple of weeks ago, and we had people travel from Birmingham down to be with us, and I would think we had 12 people. So it's finding the mechanism of how to engage people. Some people will be more engaged than others, but it is on my radar and it will be done.
Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coker. Great report. Just wanted to, and I know you're very passionate about things, you've been very helpful in the past on local issues. I have had some correspondence from residents that are particularly angry at the moment about the electric buses, because money's tight. They're replacement buses as well, so that we've got a council with a tight budget. It's working out to be 50 new replacement electric buses at a cost which is astronomical, which is 566,000 per bus. I mean, that is phenomenal. And basically, as it seems to be, the city bus want £12.3 million of council money, with a total scheme of 28 million. There was a report expected, okay? Where are we with things on this? Are you intending to invest in a private bus company?
I'm not sure what your opinion is of net zero, Councillor Ricketts, and I'm sure it's different to mine. What I would say is this was a bid that was put in by us in collaboration with Citybus and the Go Ahead company. This is not PCC money. We are the holders of the money that we were given by government. So we are like the banker for this. So we will then give out the money when everything is agreed. At the moment, we're not quite there yet, but we are the custodians, I think that's the best word, of the money.
Are you absolutely sure on that? I understand we're holding money that we've specifically bid for, but that isn't the whole amount. There's at least £750,000, which is separate to that fund, which is coming out of council taxpayers' money.
The funding comes from a direct grant from government, from the DFT through the Zebra 2 programme that we bid into, and the rest of the money comes from the Community Infrastructure Levy. So therefore there is no direct City Council funding in the project. The other point to make is that obviously this is subject to competition rules, so we've had to engage in a process which Rosie has led on in relation to the Competition and Markets Authority in relation to investing in a private bus company to modernise almost half the fleet in one go in terms of the bus fleet in the city, which self-evidently would probably be the single most significant decarbonisation of public transport that we could achieve in one go. So it's not only achieving improvements in the quality of the bus facilities and services provided to local people, but also obviously helps with the decarbonisation agenda. And that report is in the process of being considered and will be the subject of a delegated decision in due course.
Before I bring you back in, Steve, Rosie, I saw, did you wish to come in on that point?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just briefly, just confirming what Paul said to everyone in the room. So there are four parties essentially to the Plymouth Zebra programme. Of the public funding, the majority contributor is the Department for Transport through their competitive process of the Zebra 2 fund. Then Cornwall Council are the second significant provider, and then the council are submitting 750,000 of Community Infrastructure Fund levy, but we are the smallest contributor to what is a transformational programme for Plymouth buses and the decarbonisation programme. Thank you, Chair.
I'm grateful. Steve, I give everyone 2 questions. Can you make a third one very, very brief? Thank you.
Thank you. We have had 3 questions.
I know, but
it's just to wrap it. We were expecting a report on the 23rd. Has that happened yet? And when's a decision going to be made on this?
The report has just been returned to us from the Competition and Markets Authority, and we're in the process of considering that report, as we're bound to do, and then taking that forward in accordance with the requirements to consider the response that we've had from the Competition and Markets Authority. Rosie, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Paul. No, that's entirely right. So we're currently on track to consider a report. There's a 5-day grace period which we need to comply with in terms of subsidy law, which ends on Thursday, and after that, then the due process can happen in terms of decisions.
One thing I would add, Chair, if I may, is that the government previously itself did this process, but when it brought forward Zebra 2, it passported this requirement to local authorities to go through the process of working with the Competition and Markets Authority. Or put it another way, we are simply doing what the previous government did itself, with itself, to approve Zebra 1.
Good. Greater accountability. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One's a small one around the ticketing system and its affordability and accessibility. So the skipper tickets, which are accessible online if you want a large block of skipper tickets, and you can buy them from the driver, just the one-day ones. Have we looked at how that impinges on people who don't have access to online facilities in terms of ordering bulk tickets and getting better value for money? It's quite a difficult one because in London, Transport for London, you don't buy tickets anywhere. Everything is done through cards. And I just wondered where we were going with this and whether, well, not we, but where the bus companies were probably going because they have to produce the kit.
Yeah, I think the skipper ticket was something that we introduced a number of years ago because there wasn't any cross-ticketing within Plymouth and it was desperately needed. We, as a sub-regional transport board, Peninsula Transport, are working nationally to with a supplier to look at a cross-ticketing system for the whole of the region. So we are down that. We've got a work stream working on that with the full cooperation of the bus suppliers, and we aim to kind of replicate what they've got elsewhere. The interesting thing is that you know, everything is digital, as you know, but there is a recognition that we need to find an easier system for people, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
Another quick one?
Yeah, it is a very quick one. Personalised travel plan, going to be provided to every household in Plymouth. Do we have a timescale for that? Is it being rolled out already? Have I missed it? Hope not.
Yeah. Our personalised planning has been going on through our promotion team for 10 years now. I'm looking at Rosie to nod. At least 10 years. What we try and do is go through the city on a rota basis. So we will be going back to different wards to talk to people again. Our promotion was nationally recognised by Lillian Greenwood when she was chair of the Transport Select Committee as best practice. We need to look at how we take personalised travel and promotion as a whole into the next kind of 5 to 10 years, because we need to adapt and change. So it is continuing this year, and we will be looking at how we develop a 5-year strategy for personalised planning going forward.
I'm grateful. Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Looking through the report, really welcome the commitment to the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls agenda. I see in the Equality Impact Assessment that, just getting the correct percentages up before me, so 58% of males feel very safe going out after dark compared to 8% of females. Is this something that's going to be addressed in the bus improvement plan? Is there any more detail? Is there a possibility that the night buses could come back? And also I noticed that there is expected to be a spike in the over 75s population in Plymouth. Obviously people with concessionary bus passes, especially the elderly, are overrepresented as bus users. What is there any contingency or measures being taken now to sort of ensure the sort of safeguarding of that provision of bus services going forward? And also, will the increase of the single fare from £2 to £3 help to mitigate any of that? Sorry, that's a few things also rolled up.
I was going to say that's.
But if you could deal with those 4 questions succinctly, that would be great.
I might have to ask them again. The standard fare price. Do I think it will have an effect on that? No, I don't. Are there any plans to introduce night buses? Currently, no. We've tried them in the past and they weren't successful. In the terms, when I say they weren't successful, they weren't utilised very well. But they did provide a service, but because they weren't used, their cost was really expensive. Now, I would be always open to having a look at ways that we could work with the night service, especially over like the Christmas period or things like that. But have I got any immediate plans to do it? No. As we've said, I've got no immediate funds to do for the previous question. What was your other point, Sarah?
It was about the mitigation and future planning to prepare for the spike in population for the over 75s.
I think what we're doing is we're measuring where we are now, because what's happened at the moment is that age group are not travelling, Sarah. The current age group are not travelling at the moment. So we have seen a reduction of, I think it's over 20% in that age group travelling on public transport. That has come from the messaging around COVID from the pandemic time, when we were telling everybody that that you would get COVID by getting on a bus. And we're still suffering for that. What we are doing is watching and monitoring, and Rosie's teams monitor the trends to see what's going, because what we have to do is figure and forecast population growth, whether it be in the over 75s or the school age children, that we have to monitor that into our projections to look at the needs of the bus service. So we are doing that, and we do that on a regular basis.
I'm grateful. I have 2 more speakers. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Coker, I must say, it's just fantastic how much you've got your fingertips on the detail in these sessions. It's really, really impressive. My question is about subsidised bus routes that feature in the BSIP. Obviously, we'd had a number of previous routes under the previous administration that got cut, and it's to your credit and to the current administrations that were able to bring back buses like the number 30 bus, which serves residents in my ward, Drake ward, but also Peveril and Compton wards, which I know are represented in the room today. The report talks about how the funding that was there before was carried forward for 24-25 period. I'm wondering if you could provide a bit more detail about how, we understand buses like the number 30 had funding ring-fenced for 1 year only with an assessment. Can you tell us a bit about the process by which you'll be looking at that funding? I know you've got funding questions from national government, but from the point of view of ward level buses, how will decisions be made? How will we understand how they're taken? Thank you.
Right. For the non-commercial routes, we have a tendered service in place. Those tendered services finish, and that's why we did the one that you're talking about for a yearly basis, because those tenders all finish next March. So what the team are in the process of doing is looking at the cost of those services, looking at the cost per passenger, and looking at what subsidies that the current government will, or if, make available. We will look at the demographics of the area. What will then be presented to me is these are the successes or the stories of the 13 or 14 buses that we're subsidising. We have at the moment, we work like every other department to a fixed budget. That I will tell you that the team work extremely hard behind the scenes with operators to get the best possible value that we can for the tenders. I would love to be here and say I can guarantee the future of every single bus in the city, but I can't. What I can say is that my goal is to protect every current service that we have running in the city. And that's why I go back, Councillor Holloway, to what I said earlier on. We just need clarity from government as to what they intend to do, because and there is, like I said to you, the statement that came out yesterday, or it might even be published on the 28th of October, saying that over £1 billion to boost services across the country, that will really help the industry, but we just need the detail. So my door is always open, as you know, and I would expect you councillors to be lobbying me about the buses that are important in your area. I can't really give you much more detail on that.
I'm grateful, thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, really quick one. Just a reflection, really. We've heard about the decarbonisation of 50% of the fleet. To me, that's phenomenal. Not just in this city, but nationally. So I wanted to say, well done. That's amazing that that's a direction of travel. And I guess, one of the things we've been talking around today is kind of the next steps and what's next. And I guess, my challenge, you may not have the answer yet to this, but, where are the team looking beyond that decarbonisation, that 50%, you know, what's the next interesting project that you guys are looking at? Because, you know, this agenda of sort of our net zero action plan is really, really important. And I think this is, you know, best practice.
I think, as my service director has just whispered in my ear, don't forget Zebra 3 and 4. You know, and actually, some people may not approve of Zebra, but we have, with the partnership between Cornwall, as Rosie said, Plymouth City Council, and Go Ahead, their countrywide group, we've actually done extremely well on what we've put forward, and our ambition is to keep moving this forward. You know, we seized the opportunity with the last government to grab the funds that were available, and as long as I'm sat here, everyone knows my commitment to public transport. I use it all the time. It is the future, and we will be doing everything within our power to do everything that we can to get our hands on all of the money that is available.
Thank you. Mark, thank you very much. Phil, and to the team, thank you very much. A very good report, and we've heard about the sterling work that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people, I'm sure, wouldn't appreciate. Mark, you're absolutely right. The timing of government decisions, regardless whatever flavour, they never come with sufficient notice, and they're often not the ones we want. But nevertheless, the timing of this decision hasn't really helped, because we've had the announcement of the £3 cap. You say provides clarity, but what it does is it sends a message that prices are inevitably going to increase. The £1 billion in countrywide investment would be great, and we're looking forward to that detail. So the timing of the government decisions by all previous governments doesn't assist. One thing that you did mention, though, and I hope it is the case, and I'm somewhat comforted by the comments about the DFT holding us out as exemplars in the past, is that maintaining that good relationship. So for the last few years, we've done very well. It's not a plug for the Conservative government, but we've done very well out of the DFT. And going forward, we hope that that relationship is maintained and fostered to yield even better returns. And I trust that you are all over that in terms of lobbying.
We certainly are. And it was our relationship that we built with the officials from the Department of Transport, which are the key ingredients for success. And just to reassure you, Chair, we have got them coming down again in the next few weeks to talk about other things, because the DFT consider Plymouth to be very efficient, and leading, and we wouldn't, as Rosie say, be being used as an exemplar if they didn't feel that. A lot of work has gone in, and I can assure you that we have that relationship, and we also have that relationship because I chair the Peninsula Transport. We have that relationship there as well. So that is there. I want to just say one thing publicly that I've not said before, and that's to pay tribute to Councillor Sproston for all the work that he's done for us as our bus champion. It paid dividends with the DFT that we'd done this, something that not a lot of councils have done. And I just want to thank him publicly for the work that he's done on our behalf.
That's great, and that's been noted. Unfortunately, he can't vote to support that recommendation. There's a slight conflict there, but thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Kevin, as well. Committee members, the recommendation I'll set out in your papers, there are two recommendations: to note the changes to the 24 improvement plan and endorse the proposed stakeholder engagement. Are we all in favour of those? Yeah, great. Thank you. Rosie, thank you so much for joining us remotely, and thank you very much, all those here. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. Councillor Brysdale, thank you for joining us. Paul Barnard stays with us. Jonathan and John, I'll ask you to invite yourselves. Is there anyone online for this one? No, great. Okay, agenda item 8, members need networks delivery approach. Would you like to just run along the table and introduce yourselves for everybody who's watching online and the members in the room, please?
Can you hear me? John Selman from Net Zero Delivery Officer.
And John Green, Manager of the Net Zero Delivery Team.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to start off with hopefully as simple an explanation as possible about what a heat network is, something John will go into more detail about in a moment. Everything we do creates heat. And that's true of organisations as well. And most of that is waste heat that is quite literally going into thin air, or the example of South West Water going into our ocean. And so what heat networks try to do is to utilise that waste heat from major sources and redirect it through underground pipes into buildings, whether that be housing or whether that be businesses. And that's something, a technology that has existed for decades. We've already got examples on smaller scale projects here in Plymouth with the Energy from Waste facility and with the Civic District Energy Scheme as well. But this is an opportunity to do that on a much bigger scale. There's been huge work happening in this sector in Plymouth over the last decade that I'd like to recognise. That's something that's been done through numerous offices and also across different administrations as well. Over the last year, what we've really tried to do is progress from that more theoretical or small scale schemes towards more ambitious, larger scale, deliverable heat networks that really make a difference on the ground. This is something that we're very keen to do as openly and cross-party as possible. We scheduled it as the first item on our new cross-party sustainability advisory group so that different parties in Plymouth are aware of the scale of this opportunity. And we also proposed it for scrutiny early on to make sure that members had an opportunity to feed into this process. So we've scheduled it before procurement, before grant application, and way before the kind of final stop and go decision that I will make to determine how this project progresses. So why is there a need for heat networks? We know that in Plymouth, heating buildings accounts for about 28% of the city's emissions. It's huge, the second biggest sector, second only to transport. And for any of us in this room and across the city who are passionate about net zero, which I hope includes everyone here, we know that we need to substantially increase the rate at which we are decarbonising. And so we need buildings to be a significant part of that process. The heat network plans that are presented in your pack today have the potential to decarbonise over 30,000 tonnes of emissions in the city every single year. The opportunity is huge. But this isn't just about decarbonisation. And as part of this introduction, I wanted to talk about some of the other benefits to people and to place that will come from this investment. So we're talking about a huge sum of money here from external sources. The probability of over £400 million of investment in green investment, with the first phase being in the region of £60 million. Secondly, kickstarting Plymouth's most significant opportunity to provide businesses and households with the lowest cost decarbonised heat available. 3, creating around 400 direct green jobs and developing local capacity in green skills. 4, enhancing our city centre for further investment. 5, improving air quality. We know how much household and business boilers contribute to particle pollutants in the air. By giving those buildings this alternative, that will make a big difference to air quality and therefore to health outcomes. Improving water quality is something I get asked about a huge amount. As I mentioned earlier, the South West Water plant, as it currently stands, is putting warm wastewater into the Sound. This is an opportunity to redirect that instead. 7, improving the city's energy security. This is something that's come up hugely in the last couple of years with the energy crisis, and we've seen what that's done to prices in the market as well. 8, improving our climate resilience by providing decarbonised cooling solutions as well. You'll hear a lot of talk about heat today, but this is also an opportunity as we move towards a changing climate to be redirecting cooler temperatures into buildings in a sustainable way as well. 9, delivering long-term energy cost savings. This is something which Plymouth City Council has already done significantly within its own estate. The decarbonisation work we've done in the council has not only reduced our emissions, but it saves us over £500,000 every single year through retrofitting. This is something that can be done as well through heat networks too. And finally, there's an opportunity here to really inject social value into this massive project, whether that's through apprenticeships, whether that's through local supply chain procurement opportunities, through placemaking, so we can really make sure this major green investment is of huge benefit socially to local residents too. If I can invite John to run through a few slides, which is going to go through this in some detail, and then we'll be very pleased to take questions. Thank you.
Hi, Hannah, I think you've got the... Okay, you can see the presentation, hopefully. I'll try and keep this quite high level because I'm conscious of time. Just a few key points. I'll try not to go over similar grounds. So this is government driven. Plymouth has been selected as one of 17 cities under the Advanced Zoning Programme, and Department of Energy Security and Net Zero has provided significant resources, funding to help drive the scheme towards delivery. As Councillor Brydesdale mentioned earlier, the most significant single action we can take to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Heat networks were set out in every climate emergency and net zero action plan since 2019, including also our joint local planning policies are very strong in this respect, and many developments already negotiated to be connection ready, anticipating this. Strong alignment corporate plan particularly in terms of the priority green investment, jobs and skills. This doesn't require PCC capital funding to drive this forward, and there is strong market interest. We've been out to the market and done significant engagement, and there's very strong interest. Next slide, please. So the role of heat networks and heat decarbonisation. Heat's the biggest single energy use in the UK, 46% of the energy used in the UK, and 90% of the carbon emissions relating to heat, 28% of Plymouth's carbon emissions are from burning gas. The Climate Change Committee, in all its pathways to net zero, set out in the 6 carbon budget. Heat networks, in all those scenarios, were supplying 20% of the overall heat demand. And that's estimated to be a total investment in the UK of around 80 billion, which is more than the offshore wind sector currently, but obviously delivering a whole range of benefits that I will come on to in a minute. Next slide, please. So the national policy drivers, so the last government brought in the Energy Act in October 2023 that creates the powers for government to implement heat network zoning, and also consulted on the secondary legislation, the heat network regulations, back in February this year. The new government is taking those forward and anticipates those regulations will be in place in 2025. And effectively what those regulations do, they do a number of things. They take forward the technical standards, they introduce regulation of heat networks, existing and new heat networks, and Ofgem have been appointed into that role. But in terms of zoning, they also create geographic zones where heat networks, and I've seen lots of studies from other locations where this is shown to be the case, that heat networks are the lowest cost solution in quite dense areas for decarbonising heat. And effectively the zones be set out using a national model, and they've applied this to Plymouth. I'll show you the results in a minute, with requirements for certain large buildings to connect and potential role the local authority can take in locally managing zones as zone coordinator. I won't go into advanced zoning programme in this particular slide because of the slide which gives a bit more detail about it in due course. So local policy drivers, I won't go into this, but there's very strong alignment with a whole raft of policies and strategies, including the Plymouth economic strategy. Next slide, please. So the advanced zoning programme, this government programme, basically, because we're shortlisted along with other towns and cities, means that we're in a favourable position to apply for government grant from the Green Heat Network Fund towards the first phase of rollout. It's already supplied and is supplying significant resources to develop the proposals for the first phase, so technical, financial, commercial advice gone into this, provide support towards the procurement process and provide support for us to apply for government grant. As of last Friday, there was an announcement that says actually Plymouth's one of 6 out of those 17 cities. We're now one of 6 that are front runners within that programme. The first a bunch of towns and cities to receive further support to move towards zoning. Next slide, please. We've been on this journey for many years. I won't go into too much detail, but basically it's been around creating certainty and creating the conditions for rollout, putting the building blocks in place. So to move to this point where we can move at scale and deliver significant benefits for the city. Next slide, please. And the planning policy was underpinned by a citywide strategy for heat networks in 2017. You can see the green areas in the map on the left-hand side are based around the areas of greatest heat density. That includes Derriford, as you'd expect. That also includes the southern waterfront areas. And the planning policy is strong. It has meant that major developments we've been able to negotiate and secure schemes that can connect when the heat network is there. Next slide, please. And on the left-hand image, you can see some red areas. Those are the outputs of the national zoning model, which look remarkably similar to what was in our planning policy already. There are some slight differences because the red zones effectively include large waste heat sources. So it's trying to build that into the scheme, and it's all about harvesting those sources of heat that are already there at the moment, but not being deployed. Next slide, please. And the work that's already been completed through the advanced zoning programme has investigated the potential rollouts of the southern zone and what a strategic heat main would look like, and has tested this in terms of viability and economics. And this particular strategic heat network, it was principally supplied by 2 very large waste heat sources, which are the Catdown South West Water Central Plant, but also the energy from waste plant to the north. But clearly there'll be a whole range of other sources of heat that can feed into that: data centres, waste heat from refrigeration, industry, as well as renewable, to give diversity and resilience and deal with peak demands, which we know fluctuates throughout the year. So that proposal is basically around £300 million worth of investment with a zonal rollout that's clearly going to take quite a few years. Next slide, please. So you've got to start somewhere, and the advanced zoning programme support has basically developed the proposals for the first phase, which is really around harnessing and unlocking the South West Water source of heat alongside other sources of heat, bringing that resource into the city centre around some key clusters, which can then expand over time. And as mentioned earlier, cooling can also be factored into the scheme, so it gives climate resilience, and we're seeing demand for cooling increasing already. That's an investment of around £60 million. Next slide, please. And we've also investigated the potential for a scheme in Derriford in discussion with a range of major actors in that area. And if you look at the cooling demand in that area, it's very, very significant. So having a network building on the good work that Marjon have already done on their campus, extending that approach could work within the Derriford area. So it shows that there's a basis for a strong scheme in the north of Plymouth as well. Next slide, please. So we've already, some of the benefits have already been mentioned. I won't, but obviously green investment, jobs and skills is a major one, and that's something that we can push through a procurement process and try and secure, as well as other social and local value outcomes. Clearly, decarbonisation is front and centre of this, but there are lots of other benefits for Plymouth. Air quality, gas boilers produce NOx emissions. You can't see them, but they're a significant pollutant, particularly in winter in urban areas. Energy security, having this diversity of local waste heat sources means that we're not subject to the volatility associated with fossil fuel sources such as gas that we've seen in the past happen and could happen again because they're subject to global markets. And clearly lots of reputational benefits by seeing some, a significant delivery on net zero objectives that we're signed up to. Next slide, please. We've done a lot of analysis around different delivery models, supported by Burgess Salmon lawyers, but also commercial advisors. Everything from PCC owned and operated municipal model through to investment, joint venture investment, through to PCC leading a procurement process, through to leaving it to the private sector. Next slide, please. And this is very much a high-level summary, but it summarises a lot of work that's been done, analysis around the risk and reward with the different options. Clearly, the higher the investment PCC makes, the higher the risk is also, and you can't get away from that. Next slide, please. So Cabinet endorsed the PCC-led procurement approach, limited risks, because of this limited risk for PCC, with significant scope for awards, and ruled out the options about PCC investing because of the significant risk that carries, but also rules out the private sector only approach because that minimises our influence, particularly on things like local and social outcomes. Next slide, please. Market engagement, I mentioned before, strong interest. The proposed approach very much aligns with what the market's interested in. They're interested in scale. We know that they've got investment to deploy, significant investment alongside any grant. Many of them have got access to that investment or got that investment already in place. But many also emphasise social value and those benefits that could be unlocked through the process. I think we're almost there. Next slide, please. A timetable, briefly. So Cabinet delegated the business case, the executive decision, and that's anticipated to be developed and approved by the end of November this year, focusing around the detailed delivery model, launching a procurement to secure a delivery partner, but also applying for government grants. And we're looking to apply into the Green Heat Network Fund round in January next year, launch procurement early next year. If we think forward to when does delivery start, we anticipate that starting in 2026. I think this is probably the last slide, the next one. So these are the recommendations you've already seen. I don't know if there's any questions that people have. Thank you.
There will be a few. Thank you very much, Jonathan. So first on my list is Councillor Ricketts, followed by Councillor McClay.
Thank you for your opening lines and thank you for the thorough presentation. What I hope doesn't happen is this becomes a bit like to the general public, okay, that we've had the free port, but we don't actually see any action, yeah? So you're talking about trying to explain this to residents, yeah? We want to get this going with South West Water, okay? We're saying it's the first sort of go-to situation. I don't see much agreement happening there at the moment. We're hoping they're going to bite, but nothing's actually agreed. And will this actually improve water quality? Where are we with South West Water in agreeing this to get things moving?
So South West Water is just one of various major heat sources that we're in regular conversation with. This isn't a council document that we then go and speak to organisations on. They've been involved for a very long time with this process. So the South West Water plant at Catdown is one of the sites which will be involved in the first phase. But we've also been in talks with the Energy from Waste facility, which is next to Devonport and St Budo. And also there's a medical incinerator at Derriford, which will be used for that later phase, as well as smaller opportunities within that as well. And one of the many benefits of a heat network is the flexibility for those heat sources to change as time goes on. Specifically on water quality, there are many different causes to poor water quality, something the administration has been very interested in. We worked with Scrutiny to do a deep dive on water quality recently. A few weeks ago, I signed a memorandum of understanding with South West Water and the Environment Agency more broadly on water quality issues to do work around nature-based solutions and channeling investment into that topic. Specifically on whether this would address water quality issues, it's slightly different to the area that's mostly talked about with the water companies, which is on storm overflows. But yes, we know that ocean heating is an issue for marine life, and with water companies pumping warm wastewater into waters, then that is a problem this would help to address.
I think what's key to this is we get something tangible to the general public. I'm thinking the civic centre, is that potential?
So as you see on the map, the city centre will be our starting point on that first £60 million project. Been various organisations linked up in that, and when we get to that stage, there have been other major public organisations linked up with this. This isn't just a theoretical project, so people will see work happening on the ground as soon as we get through that stage. And actually one of the benefits of being in the advanced zoning programme is that's the government trying to accelerate delivery of this as quickly as possible.
Councillor McClay.
Thank you, Chair. It's really, really exciting to have tangible plans like this in front of us. There's been a huge amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes, like huge credit to the officers and everyone involved in putting this forward. It was also really great to be on that cross-party sustainability subcommittee. I think that's a real asset as well. I am really not one to let perfect be the enemy of good at all, but I want to dig into the proposed governance structure just a little bit to help me understand. Can you let me know what the proposed revenue is from the two zones? I'm just keen to see how much money the council could be missing out on if we go forward with the current proposal. Also, if we go ahead with this structure, are we locking in opted-in businesses and residents to a monopoly? And how are we as the council proposing to hold the private sector to account on their social value commitments? Because there's a lot of good that we could do with this.
So one of the topics that I think we've focused on for at least a year, back and forth in numerous meetings, is on ownership structures. So we've had various conversations with legal experts. We've also gone to other local authorities who are further ahead than us in this process, including ones that have had and operated heat networks for some time. When you look at the scale of money involved in this, if the council was going to invest £400 million of its own capital investment over the next 3 decades, there will be huge risk associated with that. We've seen examples here in the UK where councils have set up their own energy companies with their own money at risk, and that's led to essentially the bankruptcy of those councils, Nottingham being a really unfortunate example of that. We've looked at various examples of that, and right at the heart of that has been how we inject our social values into that. And so the procurement-led approach gives us many opportunities to look at what we're doing with social actions in that, looking around opportunities for tariffs that could apply, for instance, to social housing associations, looking at what we could do with looked after children or apprenticeships to make sure that people in more vulnerable social situations are at the heart of this. And so on a balance of different priorities, that's where we think is best for us as a local authority. If we went for a 100% publicly owned version of this, there would be a significant risk that we wouldn't be able to deploy it at all. It would make the project unviable, and we'd miss out on the huge decarbonisation benefits that we've explored today. John, did you want to add at all to the other financial opportunities and risks associated with this?
Yes, heat networks are long-term projects, and you're looking at a sort of 40-year investment cycle. It's very difficult for us to say this is how much revenue, but the revenue tends to start to, it's very capital intensive. So the first 10 years, you're repaying the capital. So I think that's why pension funds particularly like heat networks. They've got strong decarbonisation objectives, but they've also looking for the long term. So there is a lot of investment flowing into the sector. We know that's out there, but it's not a sort of something that the council could get a quick return on. Just to emphasise that point. On the regulation side, yes, Ofgem have been appointed as regulator already. There's a voluntary scheme that's been in train that's required by government funding at the moment through the Heat Trust, but Ofgem would be taking on that role as in terms of consumer protections and price caps, etc. But clearly through the procurement, we can also try and drive that process as well.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really reassuring. It's come up a few times on today's scrutiny about grid compatibility and capacity as well. If we go ahead with this, are we able to get plugged in as soon as the project's up and running?
From a scrutiny point of view, I think this is a major project and it'd be really good to bring it back at a future date. We'll also be further along that process with regards to what that relationship looks like with the delivery partners, whether that could be something like involvement on board or a golden share option, those kind of opportunities as well. And so,
sorry, Tom, I think I was more meaning in reference to the national grid and the capacity for plugging in. We won't need to be there, will we?
in a sense of grid decarbonisation. So that would be less relevant to that because that's talking about the electric side of things. But no, we can certainly come back to that.
Alden? Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's really, really interesting and really, really exciting to hear about what's planned. I just noted that since the report was published, there's been an announcement from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero that we're going to be part of 6 cities to get additional funding towards this. So appreciate that has happened since the report, but has there been any assessment of how that's going to impact on the plans that we've got already?
Thank you. Yeah, great question, Matt. So this is something which was announced last Friday. Very, very recent news, so apologies that it couldn't have been in the pack. I think it shows a great vote of confidence in Plymouth. So we're very lucky to be involved in the zoning pilot programme initially. That was 28 towns and cities across the country. We then got shortlisted onto the advanced zoning programme, which was 17, and now we've managed to get into the kind of top 6, if you will, to get that and unlock that initial government support. So far, that's looked like really useful legal and technical advice. They've been great with templates they've provided in terms of linking us up to other local authorities. There's a £6 million share that will be going into those 6 as well. And so bearing in mind it's only a small number of local authorities, we're looking forward to the further details about how much will be linked up specifically from that extra amount. But it will certainly help us progress at a quicker rate.
I'm grateful. Thank you. There are no more speakers. Tom and Co, thank you very much for presenting that. Really interesting. We have some recommendations to make. Members, they're set out in your pack, recommendations 1, 2 and 3 to support the zonal approach to the network rollout, support the procurement of development partner, and to support the application for government green heat network. Are we all in favour? Yes? Great, thank you very much. That recommended. Thank you, gents. You're free to go. Members, we're now moving on to agenda item 9, tracking decisions. Anything for me, Hannah? I was having a cursory read of those earlier.
Obviously, there are a couple still outstanding. There is an update on the third one down, which was as a result of the NZAP last year. I will circulate that with members, but essentially an approach has been agreed for weighting environmental impact when tendering contracts. I've been informed that there's a lot of other procurement changes coming in February 2025, so that's going to be implemented then, and Councillor Brysdale is due to share an update with all members of the council, and obviously once that's done, I'll take that as complete.
Any questions from members in respect to the tracking decisions?
Just a quick one. The tracking decision, minute 5, Water Quality Select Committee, has the letter gone out?
There are several letters outstanding. I've chased the officer, but not received any update.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. Thank you.
I was also going to say about the water quality stuff. We've talked about it quite a lot today. I think it's quite pertinent. I think you've chased it like 3 times on some of these issues.
I absolutely echo your point, and it's a conversation that we're going to have after this meeting. Well, I'll put it to you now. Rather than getting into a lengthy debate about it, I do think we need to understand what Westwater's plans are, and more importantly, is that going to assist us in our fantastic plans for the future? And I wonder, Cream, we haven't had that conversation yet, but I wonder if we can, without making a recommendation, just work out how we can weave that into our work schedule, which is the next agenda item. There are no elections next year, so we could add in another meeting just for that particular item, and we could make it quite meaty, because it's a lot of our plans are predicated on infrastructure being in place, and we don't understand, and this is part of that as well. So you're absolutely right. So if you're content with that, I'll have that conversation after this meeting. Yep, thank you so much. There was, Councillor Allen, were you going to repeat that query? Thank you. All right. Apart from that, then we'll do to the, so that's item number 9. And then number 10 is the work programme. Well, notwithstanding the point about maybe another meeting going in next year, if we can deal with that regarding South West Water, water quality and all of that. Are there any questions in respect to the work programme?
Are you looking for ideas, are you?
Well, more questions. We've got a busy schedule as it is, but of course, if you want to throw something out there that we can consider adding.
If possible, to explore working from home in relation to Plymouth City Council staff. Just looking into that particular subject.
Through you, Chair, I think that would be better suited. It would either be Scrutiny Management Board or the Housing and Customer Community Services. So
I'll raise it there.
Yeah.
Probably customers.
I wanted to maybe make a case for sustainable transport moving up the agenda to a nearer meeting. I know we haven't got it programmed in yet, but given the crash that happened on Further Valley with the cyclist, I think it's really important that we look at our cycling infrastructure and active travel sooner rather than later if possible.
I see that's very far down the agenda, so yeah, we'll have a look at that. Thank you. Apologies once again for my very tardy arrival. Thank you so much for standing in, Chair, and thank you very much for all of you remaining for the entire meeting. A really good meeting. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.